making connections to the world. Empowering language on humanity. Let's bring the world of learning in one channel. Welcome to Business Combinations English TV.
Hello everyone! We're done with the parts 1 and 2 of our lesson on grammatical signals or expressions. And today, we're going to explore a new topic which is primary and secondary sources. I am Teacher Kathleen, your English teacher for today. Now, we are in quarter 4, week 3. And our most essential learning competency is expand the content of an outline using notes from primary and secondary sources. And its enabling competency is use writing conventions to indicate acknowledgement of sources. But before we proceed to our lesson proper, here are the learning objectives. First, differentiate primary and secondary sources of information. Second, sort and identify the difference between primary and secondary sources. And lastly, appreciate the importance of primary and secondary sources of information in academic writing. In writing an academic essay or research, you have to gather information and evidences from a variety of sources like books, news articles, interviews, websites, etc. In this week's module, we will discuss the primary and secondary sources, what they are, and when you can use them. What is a primary source? A primary source is anything that gives you a direct evidence about the people, events, or phenomena that you are researching. Primary sources will usually be the main objects of your analysis. If you're researching the past, you cannot directly access it yourself, so you need primary sources that were produced at the time by the participants or witnesses. Examples are letters, photographs, and newspapers. If you are researching something current, your primary sources can be collected by yourself. For example, through interviews, surveys, experiments, or sources produced by people directly involved in the topic, such as official documents or media texts. What is a secondary source? Secondary source is anything that describes, interprets, evaluates, or analyzes information from primary sources. Common examples include books, articles, and documentaries that synthesize information on a topic, synopses and descriptions of artistic works, encyclopedias and textbooks that summarize information and ideas, reviews and essays that evaluate or interpret something. Primary versus secondary sources, which is better? Most research uses both primary and secondary sources. They complement each other to help you build a convincing argument. Primary sources are more credible as evidence, but secondary sources show how your work relates to existing research. So here are examples of primary, secondary, and general sources of information. For primary sources, we have music scores, maps, photos, acts of law, data sets, novels, legal rulings, speeches, and interviews. We also have journal, articles, and technical papers. For secondary sources, we have newspaper articles, documentaries, textbooks, journal articles, and review articles. For general sources, we have handbooks and manuals, textbooks, dictionaries and encyclopedias, and practice guidelines. So when do we use primary source and secondary source? For primary sources, we use them to make new discoveries, to provide credible evidence for your arguments, and to give authoritative information about your topic. For secondary sources, we use them to gain background information on the topic, to support or contrast your arguments with other researchers' ideas, and to gather information from primary sources that you can't access directly, for example, private letters or physical documents. Okay, now that we understand the lesson about primary and secondary sources, it is about time to assess your learning. For your learning task, sort the sources and the characteristics in the appropriate circle. Any sources or characteristics that are both primary and secondary may be written in the center circle. You may refer to this list of sources and Venn diagram. For your assessment, choose an appropriate answer to the following questions. Number 1. Speech is an example of which type of sources? A. Primary source. B. Secondary source. 2. In research writing, researchers are advised to use which type of sources? A. Primary source. B. Secondary source. Number 3. The statement, I heard or learned about it from somebody who was there, refers to A. Primary source. B. Secondary source. Number 4. Which source helps the student to have a deeper understanding about the history? A. Primary source. B. Secondary source. And last number, if you read a newspaper to get an information in writing an article, which source are you using? A. Primary source. B. Secondary source. To wrap everything up, keep in mind the following about primary and secondary sources. Primary sources are first-hand accounts, record, or evidence about a person, case, object, or an event. Point of view. I was there more credible as evidence. Examples are videos, films, interviews, weather records, letters, diaries, and legal agreements. On the other hand, secondary sources are accounts, records, or evidence that comes from an original or primary source. Point of view. I heard or learned about it from somebody who was there. Show how your work relates to existing research. Examples are textbooks, documentaries, and journal articles. So that ends our lesson about primary and secondary sources. Always remember, be the best here at DCBEST MLHS English TV. See you next time as we learn another English lesson. Bye!